Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia, welcome back to Overwatch, and today we're going to talk about some Overwatch esports, but not the Overwatch League. We're going to talk about the Open Division Breakable Barriers tournament that's been going on over the past few days. So, the Breakable Barriers tournament has been quite an interesting tournament because we've had a lot of different people coming into it. We've had streamers coming into it, we've had Overwatch contenders teams coming into it. We've had a very broad variety of people, an open division, and anyone could join, so it was a really cool competition to see people get into. There was a massive, like, qualification stage, and then we got the top 16 results. So today, we're going to go through the EU part of it. I say EU, it's not just EU, it's actually EU, Middle East and Africa. And then we will go through the American part of it in the next video on this subject. But there's a lot to get through, so let's crack on and look at some of the standout parts of the Breakable Barriers tournament. That is the first tournament we've had on the 1.44 patch, so the barrier nerf patch, which, yeah, not a lot has changed. Interesting. So I'm going to start off with a few notable things from basically the, like, qualification stages, I suppose you could say, in the tournament. Because there was a raft of games in the qualification stages in the early rounds, and it's basically impossible to cover it all. But two things I wanted to note pretty highly. One was HSL Esports. HSL Esports, obviously current holders of the European Contenders title. They competed in the Gauntlet not so long ago. They bummed out in the first round against Novus Ordo Seclorum, who are a Contenders Trials team. So that was a pretty big upset to see HSL go out so early. And the interesting thing is, HSL actually had two teams in this. They had their academy in this as well. Their academy actually got further than the actual HSL roster did. So, oops. That's all I can say about that. It's an interesting one, and we didn't expect that to happen. Also, Clockwork Vendetta, another European Contenders team. Obviously, Clockwork Vendetta were making a lot of headlines in Contenders with the new Torbjorn kind of thing they were running. It kind of bled slightly into the Overwatch League, but didn't really catch on too much. They also bummed out in the earlier qualification stages against, yes, the HSL Academy. So that was another surprise, perhaps, to see Clockwork Vendetta bumming out so early. Clockwork Vendetta have had a few issues in the off-season after the Contenders season wrapped up, though, because they have been, like, their team has been looking at other options, especially their players have been looking at other options like Overwatch League and such. So it's not a massive surprise to see Clockwork Vendetta perhaps struggle slightly. I think they've got some stuff to work out before the 2020 Contenders season though, because can't be losing to some of these teams, especially HSL and Clockwork Vendetta are the two teams I would expect to say, there's work to do. Teams that got through the qualification stages, Young and Beautiful, Raspberry Racers will be coming up in a minute. Interesting team. Team XD, we'll talk about Team XD in a minute. And some interesting teams that we haven't seen before coming in and making a wave, shall we say. But on to the actual round of 16. This is more towards the end of the tournament, but this is where things slightly kind of iron out and make more sense. So, we had Raspberry Racers taking on Young and Beautiful. Raspberry Racers were a fairly unknown team coming into this, but they were a team that were basically made just before the tournament was started, basically. Raspberry Racers were made up of ex-Contenders players, basically. So, Naga, Shockwave we don't know too much about, Haffical, we should all know Haffical, Helve, Watery, and Keikomi. And it's a team that, honestly, their performance in this Open Division tournament, Breakable Barriers, whatever, they could be a Contenders team for 2020. It depends whether they want to be a Contenders team for 2020 or not, but a very interesting team. And a team to keep an eye on in the future, especially the players who are playing for them. But they actually beat Young and Beautiful in the round of 16. So they knocked out a Contenders team, albeit a Contenders Trials team, because Young and Beautiful did go down to Contenders Trials at the end of last season. But Young and Beautiful are still around, and obviously they'll be competing in Trials, perhaps against Raspberry Racers, who knows. But Raspberry Racers moved on to the quarterfinals, and they would face Team XD. Team XD did beat Killer Destroyers 69. Oh, these names. Now, Team XD. Yes, Team XD. Team XD was the meme team of the EU side of the tournament, basically. So Team XD had Craggy, Raddy, Zhao, Boga, ML7, Awkward, and it was, I believe, meant to have Defran, but yeah, Defran never ended up turning up, so we didn't get to see Defran in action, but it was a heck of a team, and it was a real interesting team. They got through against Killer Destroyers 69 in the round of 16 to take on Raspberry Racers in the quarterfinals. We'll go on to that in a minute. Avoided beat Niriki Esports to move on to the quarterfinals, and We're Wasting Walls, or WWW, moved on after beating Power Esports into the quarterfinals to take on Avoided. Then we got to some more interesting teams. So British Hurricane, the academy team of London Spitfire, they were in the round of 16 against Novus Ordo Seclorum. Obviously, we talked about Novus Ordo Seclorum earlier on, knocking out HSL. So that was a bit of a surprise, but British Hurricane were a step too far. I don't think they picked up a map against British Hurricane. British Hurricane moved on to the quarterfinals, where they would face HSL Academy, because HSL Academy beat the Project Phoenix team in the round of 16. So then we move on to the Barcelona Manticores, who took on the Borist Apex. Barcelona won this one, and then Team Banshee did lose to Vox Nihili. That rounds off our round of 16. So, quarterfinals, Raspberry Racers versus Team XD. I think this was always going to be a fairly close one. Team XD, I think, had the better, perhaps, core roster, but not perhaps the best synergy compared to Raspberry Racers. Raspberry Racers ended up winning this one 3-2. Team XD, it was a bit of a meme, you know. We kind of wanted to see them go all the way, but they did it in the end. Raspberry Racers move on with the likes of Happy Call to the semi-finals. Then, who would they be facing? Would it be Avoided or We're Wasting Walls? It was Avoided. Avoided won this one 3-0 over We're Wasting Walls. I love the names. I really do. Avoided will move on to face the Raspberry Racers in the semi-finals. And then we had the British Hurricane taking on the HSL Academy. British Hurricane ran out 3-0 winners over the HSL Academy. HSL Academy did do better than HSL, so nothing to be ashamed of from the HSL Academy going out to British Hurricane. British Hurricane, though, looking very good, and the ones to watch going into Contenders 2020. And then the Barcelona Manticores did lose 3-1 to Vox Nihili, and they will move on to face the British Hurricane. So in the semi-finals, we saw the Raspberry Racers taking on the Avoided, and the Raspberry Racers won this one 3-1 to propel themselves into the finals. But who would they be facing? Would it be the British Hurricane or Vox Nihili? It was the British Hurricane. The British Hurricane, again, ran through 3-0 winners over Vox Nihili. And, yeah, British Hurricane. They kind of fell into the wilderness a bit at the end of last year. And they had to go through trials at one point. And now they seem to be biting back slightly. So British Hurricane looked like a team worth keeping an eye on going into 2020, as I said just now, as they did move on to the finals, where they would face the Raspberry Racers and, of course, Hafakul, the ex-British Hurricane player. It was 3-0 to the British Hurricane. British Hurricane, I don't believe, dropped a single map this entire tournament. So, yeah, British Hurricane looking very good. And perhaps we're seeing a shift in Contenders EU because we've seen HSL Esports struggle. We also saw Clockwork Vendetta go out fairly early. They were two teams that were near the top of European Contenders at the end of last year. So, yeah, it looks like we could be seeing a shift. Young and Beautiful didn't have it all their own way against Raspberry Racers. Raspberry Racers looked like they could be a Contenders team if they wanted to be. Who knows what will happen there, because it might be a case that a more established team, should we say, comes along and nicks a lot of those players from the Raspberry Racers. But I'd love to see a team called the Raspberry Racers in EU Contenders, so please make it happen if you're going to. It would be awesome to see. There was a lot of cool talent on show during this tournament. It was really nice to see. Novus Ordo Seclorum, I think they're a team we could see in Contenders as well. They were in Contenders trials early last year, but kind of bowed out pretty unceremoniously. They didn't take part at the end of last year, and perhaps we will see them back this year, considering that they were able to knock out the likes of HSL, which is no mean feat when you look at HSL's record. So, things to take away from this. Team XD had a brilliant time. They had a brilliant time running some pretty crazy comps at times as well. If you're going to watch anything, go and watch Team XT, but I'm not sure they were broadcast on the actual Open Division broadcast of it. I think you'd have to go to probably Craggy's stream to go and see that. British Hurricane dominated throughout the entire tournament. Yeah, not much to say about that. Raspberry Racers were a surprise package, but they've got some really good players on that roster. I'd love to see the Raspberry Racers, either their roster or the team entirely, come into EU contenders for Season 1 of 2020. It would be really nice to see. Young and Beautiful, with work to do. HSL Esports with a lot to do, being beaten by their academy team. And also Clockwork Vendetta, with some things to iron out before the start of next season's contenders. But that will round it up for the EU part of the Breakable Barriers Open Division competition number 1. I hope they do this again, because this has really been interesting. You've seen some mean teams come in, and when we get to NA, which possibly might be tomorrow's video, that's going to be crazy, because we're going to start talking about people that either we haven't seen on the pro scene for a long time, or have kind of stepped back a bit from the pro scene now. So I'm talking about people like Harblu, we're talking about Jake, Carefree, J3, XQC, Kabaji, people like this. Really interesting to see them back on the scene and playing in a competitive environment. It's really interesting to see, and believe me, I've heard the comms for XQC's team. Oh boy, how on earth did they get anything done? But I'm going to leave it here for this one. The NA video is going to be really, really good. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.